What's good, guys? So I've been using Bubble since around 2019, 2020, and I made tons and tons of videos about it, discussing every little nook and cranny of this no-code tool. But for the last 6 months, I've been using exclusively FlutterFlow, and so I've been going deep into FlutterFlow, and so far I really like it, and I've been recommending it to others as well because I feel this is a really great tool. But now I've decided to go back to Bubble and see if anything has changed, if there's some new functionality, new features, and really get the feel for it as compared to FlutterFlow. And so maybe it's time to go back to Bubble, or maybe I will keep using FlutterFlow. Let's go see and find out. All right, so here I'm back in Bubble, and as you can see, I have a bunch of apps that I created on this account. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and create an app. And before I do so, I just wanna know that they've redesigned this page here. It looks a lot cleaner. So that is the first impression. So let's go ahead and create a brand new app, and this is all the same. No template. We're gonna say test app. We're doing a other. Is it internal? Details about your app. Build a tool for myself. All right, let's go and create this app. That is taken. All right, so here we are in Bubble here, okay? It has an assistant. We're gonna skip it. And there's a new upgrade to deploy, which wasn't there before. So I guess this is part of a new pricing strategy here. This, I believe it's got to be on this plan now. Access to live version. Yeah, I guess it's this one right here. And this is kind of this basic plan that I'm on. All right. So let's see here. Okay, so we have this UI. And the first thing I want to say is that FlutterFlow is mobile first. Whereas in Bubble, you're basically designing a web app initially, right? You're looking at a screen for a web app, whereas with FlutterFlow, you are on kind of a mobile screen, first screen. And the second thing I want to say is that with Bubble, you just drag and drop, right? You can just drag and drop, and yeah, you can kind of center it here. You can align them. You can do all that. And yes, there are ways of kind of aligning them. All of this is available. But in FlutterFlow, it's very direct. It's very kind of more intuitive, right? It's rows, columns, and then inside the row, you can do it, you can center it, you could center it to edges. There's all kinds of ways to aligning it. And so I, as somebody who's not like a real, like a trained designer, I really find FlutterFlow's alignment methodology, philosophy more intuitive. All right, so let's say we have this input here, and the first thing that you can do is you can insert dynamic data. This is very helpful because, this is the same thing in FlutterFlow. There's an option to insert it from a variable. And so here I can insert, I can do a current user, do a search for. So I can do a built-in search for here, right? I can do a search for and then insert data. This is really slick. And another thing in Bubble that is not available in FlutterFlow is that you have options of inserting, you have functions automatically that you can execute. So for instance, if I'm searching for users, right, this thing is going to return a list. It's going to return an array, and automatically Bubble is suggesting to me ways of returning an integer, right? Because at the end of the day, this does not respond to a list. You can't fit a list in here. This is a single value kind of thing here, right? This thing, and Bubble understands that, and that is why it's telling me item number, random item, last item, first item. So this is really nice, and there's lots and lots of things, okay? And this and this way, Bubble has more functionality than FlutterFlow, okay? So let's go ahead and let's delete that. So we have current user, get an option. So you can store options, get data from an external API, just like with FlutterFlow. And you can do a calculate formula. So there's a bunch of formulas that we can input and we can calculate. Okay, that's very nice. Now, before I look at the UI and all that, let's go into the data, right? Because we got to start with data, right? You're building an app. It's going to be manipulating some data, and this is where definitely Bubble shines because it has these data types and it has app data. Okay, so basically you can start building stuff right inside the app and you can actually see the data. So let's say I have a user data type. I want to create a new data type like a to-do item, right? To-do, and I can say, well, to-do is going to have, I'm going to create a new field. and it's going to have a name, which is a text, okay, and it's going to have a done, which is kind of a flag, a Boolean flag, yes, no, okay, yes, no. So we have a kind of a to-do, which is publicly visible, and here I can go into app data, and I can view the data, right? This is very, very helpful, and FlutterFlow does not have this built in. They might do that in the future, but it's not available. So this is definitely, you know, a checkbox in the bubbles column, right? So I can create a new to-do. I can say, well, this hasn't been done yet, you know, do buy groceries, for instance, right? Create, okay? And so I create it, I can hide this message, and now we have one row here, one item inside this this data type here, and I can go out and create more data types. And what's really nice is that I can create a list, right? So I can come in here and I can say to-do list, right? I can create a to-do list, and then I can create a new field, and I can call it to-do, and I can link them to this to-do here, right? So this list could be a list of to-do items. So it becomes a relationship, right? This is like a one-to-many relationship, right? To-do list has many of these to-do items. So this is very, very helpful. And yes, you can do it with Firebase, Firestore. You can do all of that and more, but it's nice that it's built in, right? It's very, very nice. This is one thing I really, really like about Bubble, because a lot of these no-code builders, they just, you know, either they don't have this or it's not as easy to use. And so this is a huge thing. This is a huge thing. So I can create a new entry here, to-do list, and, you know, I can go out and I can, you know, enter a search field. I can say, well, I want to search by, you know, I want to search by name, okay? And I can go ahead and search name. And what do we have? Do we have that? Groceries, right? So I can type groceries, and I can find that to-do. It automatically searches it, right? Because we're pulling in a record, and I can create a to-do list from this one to-do here. And this could have obviously multiple to-dos if I can create it as an array, right? So great database functionality here. Really, really nice. So this is definitely an advantage with Bubble. All right, let's go back to the design, and let's say we want to display our to-dos. Let me go back to data. I want to create a couple of more to-dos. I'm going to go to app data. We're going to create, let's say, no do work. Okay, so we have, let's create one more. No get paid. All right, and maybe workout. So let's say buy groceries. I'm going to set that to yes. So at least we have something set to yes. And now we have 4 entries, and one is set to yes. Very simple. You have built-in fields here. You can even have a slug, which is basically like a unique link to this field here, right? That you can identify it using a unique link. And we have created by admin. So this is very, very important. This metadata, very important, very cool. Now the next thing that I can do is I can drag a repeating group right here, which is kind of the standard procedure for building and displaying things. And we can make it, let's say, 10 rows. Actually, no, let's make it 5 rows. And then we can drag a text right here. And this is going to be automatically repeatable. And then you can go into layout for the repeating group, and you can specify how you want to align the cells. And so once you do that, this is a nifty feature. You can align them to specific locations, right? So let's say something like here. And now we can specify where you want it, center, left, etc., etc. Now you can specify the type, and here you can specify the source, and here you have constraints, filters, sorting, stuff like that. We're not going to do anything. We just want all the data. And you can do the same thing in FlutterFlow, except in FlutterFlow that only works if you're getting data from Firebase, Firestore, DB. It does not work if you're getting data from like an API, stuff like that. So once we have that, it's configured with the data. We can drag and drop a text field right here and place it here, and that's going to do a repeating. It's going to make it inside the group, and that way we can come in here, insert dynamic data, and we can specify what we want to display inside there. So we're going to say current cells to do, and we're going to pick name. Okay, so this right here is going to display the name of the to do, and then we can drag another one, and we can do insert dynamic data, current sales to do, and then we can say whether it's done or not, okay? And so right there, that should display a list of to-dos, right? And so if we preview the app, let's see what happens. And there is the list of to-dos. Very, very simple, very easy, right? Very easy, very, very like kind of, I want to say like kind of very simplified, right? Is the word, right? Very, very simplified. And obviously you can keep going, right? You can kind of arrange it here. And maybe you have, remember, we have those meta fields. And so we can say, and you want to correctly align it. And we can say current sales to do, creation date, right? And then let's go ahead and preview that. And it previews it. So one thing to note here is that the deployment, previewing, checking if everything works is a lot faster in FlutterFlow. And the reason for that is FlutterFlow is based on Flutter, which is based on the Dart programming language. And so it recompiles it. It's a much more programmatic friendly framework than Bubble. Bubble is very proprietary. There is no, you can't generate the code for this. You can't take the code anywhere. And so that's why it's fast. It's very fast. Whereas FlutterFlow is, it just generates code, and you can create a test environment. It's going to be fast, but still it's going to be slower than Bubble, because Bubble is like very, very fast. So here we have a list. You can do that. Now you can align them. It has ways of aligning them, but again, I really like how FlutterFlow works in that respect. And we have a lot of other things, right? We can, for instance, we can extend this right here and maybe put a button, right? So we can drag and drop a button right there. And then this button could be click me, and that can start a workflow, right? What do buttons do? They start a workflow. And we can start a workflow, and then we're redirected to another screen where we can create workflow. And this is similar to FlutterFlow's actions, okay? And so here I can add, so we have the event, right? Which is similar in FlutterFlow. And here I can add a new action. And I have account, navigation, data, email, payment, analytics, a lot of these other cool things here. Okay, now in FlutterFlow, you're not going to have like payment unless you configure Stripe, which is the case here. You're not going to have email, element actions, okay. You have data, which is very nice. So this data thing, very, very nice. You have the same thing in FlutterFlow. Navigation, you have that in FlutterFlow as well. Account, you have that in FlutterFlow. So let's say we want to do navigation, go to page. We don't have a new page, so we're going to create a new page. Index 2, let's create a new page. We're not going to clone it. All right, so we have this page now. Let's select this page, and it's going to redirect it. Now we can specify data to send, and this is similar in FlutterFlow parameters. So we can send maybe a current sales to do name, okay? Very simple. And so now if you send this, the other page is going to be expecting this element, right? We can also send current pages parameters, which is a great feature, right? Because if we have page 1, page 2, page 3, and you're going from page 1 to page 2 and then page 2 to page 3, you want page 3 to have like all the data of all the other pages. So this is a very nice feature. I don't believe this is automatic in FlutterFlow, so this is built in. And you can even send more parameters, so you can even add parameters. FlutterFlow does it a little bit differently when you're sending parameters, which I kind of like FlutterFlow's method better, because on FlutterFlow, before you can send parameters, you need to define them on the target page. So if I'm sending from page 1 to page 2, I go in and define it on page 2. I basically say, well, page 2 is going to be expecting these parameters, and then I can send them. So this is nice. It doesn't work like that in Bubble. Bubble, you can just send to any page. So we can send, let's just skip that, and we're going to be sending name, and it's going to go redirect to name. And so now, if we come in here, if we preview this, okay, and I say click me, it redirects to the second page, and nothing is happening. We can go to the second page here, page 2, and we can actually display the data that we're being passed. And so we can come in here, and on this page, we can create an element. We can click on it, double click, insert dynamic data, and say that we want to get data from page URL. And here you can specify what exactly we want to get. Is it the parameter, path, or path segment? And we're going to say path and text. And that now it should display the data that we're passing. So let's go ahead and preview this. And there we go. That's the name of the to-do. If we go back and I click workout, now it says workout. Okay, so that's a fairly interesting way of doing it. Very, lots of things that you can pass, because the fact of the matter is that you can come here, you have this workflow, and then you can say, well, what do we want to pass? Page parameters, more page parameters, or this thing, which is separate. So there's lots of things. I personally like just parameters, right? This is simplifying it, right? All of it is parameters. Here, it's basically creating 3 types of parameters, right? This kind of built-in parameter, right, which is what we want to send right away. Page parameters, other page parameters, and then more parameters. With FlutterFlow, it's just parameters. Call them how you want. That is what you get. I like FlutterFlow's approach better. I think this is, I don't know if they're trying to simplify it or complicate it. I like FlutterFlow's approach better. So you can add another action, and this is very similar to FlutterFlow. You have multiple actions in the action editor there, so you can do all that. Let's see, we can also do API calls, right? So we just go into plugins. You need to install a third-party plugin. It's called API connector. You can just install it, click done, and now you can do API calls. Okay, so what we can do is we can come in here, add another API, and we can create an API. And these are going to be calls that we are going to be sending external requests. Okay, so I can say this is API 1. Authentication, etc. And I can say, well, this is my first call. I can expand it. This is a get method. I can say this is either going to be data or action, meaning that are we going to be, getting data back, or we're just going to be creating an action and doing something, right? So get request is going to be kind of with data. Post is typically going to be like an action call. And you can do the same thing in FlutterFlow. It's all available, but I will say one thing is that let's say we need to do an API. And so here I have a sample API that I use for testing purposes. I have a project. And if we open it up, so if I go in here, this is my endpoint here. Items is my endpoint here. So this is going to return a bunch of data. So if I do items, this is the data I'm getting back. So if I use this API in Bubble, it's actually very nice. I can come in here. This is going to be data because we're getting back data, JSON. I'm going to initialize a call, okay? And so once I initialize the call, it's really nice what it does. Now take a look at this API right here. I have created a name, avatar, and ID. So I have 4 fields, and with Bubble, it figures it out. Like it figures out the IDs. Well, ID is actually a number, so you need to modify it. But what Bubble does, it takes the API call and tries to get the data types. Okay, with FlutterFlow, it doesn't do that, right? And furthermore, if I save it here, now Bubble understands what's happening. Bubble understands it. So I can go back to my design, and let's say now I want to display the API. So let me delete that, and I come in here, and now this is going to be API, right? So I say API call. I'm going to say get data from an external API, my API close. And now Bubble knows the data. Like in FlutterFlow, you need to use something called a JSON Path, which is you can do the same thing, but it's very low level, right? It's like what programmers do. Whereas with Bubble, it's very kind of understandable, right? So I can drag a text right here. I can come in here, and let's say I want to drag another one. And I can come back here, and I could say dynamic data, current cells API call, and it understands, it gives me data. So this is a lot easier. Whereas in FlutterFlow, you have to go in and you have to like manually specify the field and all that. And furthermore, you can't just make a call in FlutterFlow. You need to make the call, and then you need to do something like generate items from children, right? Or generate children from a list, or whatever that function is called. That's like the 4th tab over there. And so you can't use it directly. So this is a lot more polished in Bubble. So here I can say, well, I want an ID. Here I want, what do I want here? Dynamic data, current cells API call. I want the name. Okay, and it understands it. And then I can pass data. So let's click on it. Let's start the workflow. Now we don't have that thing. We don't have the the old thing, the old to-do list anymore, right? So I can say current sales API call, and I can pass the name. Okay, right there, we can pass the name. And what's cool about it, something to add, right? I can say name, and it has like a lot of functions that you can do. Split by, can split by name. All of this is only possible in FlutterFlow using custom functions, right? This is what I was talking about in one of the FlutterFlow videos, is that a lot of these things are not doable automatically. And this is a really nice thing. So I could just pass the name, and then if I run it, let's go ahead and preview this. And look how fast it reloads, right? FlutterFlow is going to be like, a few seconds here and there. So we have the list. This is my GET request, right? I can say click me, and it displays the name here, okay? And if you're wondering why the name has these funny %, it's URL encoded. You just have to decode it, which is very simple. So if I click, it passes the name. So this is a big advantage for Bubble when it comes to API handling, okay? But just to give credit to FlutterFlow, they're developing it rapidly. And so they're even adding a lot of things. Like in the last month, I saw like upgrades to how it's displayed. There's a lot of things. So it's not ruled out that they won't have a feature similar to Bubbles later on. This is a very important feature. It's going to make your development a lot easier, right? At the end of the day, all this development a lot easier because you don't have to go out and do the JSON path, which is, it's doable, but it's very programmatically kind of ad hoc way. All right, so we have this, we got the APIs. Let's go into, we have styles, and styles are pretty much the same across. You can have a style there, you can have a style there. I don't think it's worth comparing it. Let's talk about plugins, okay? So plugins, you can add new plugins. I have a video on my channel telling you about how to build plugins. I have like an entire tutorial how to build plugins for Bubble. And it's a very proprietary way of building plugins, okay? FlutterFlow is, you can build a custom function, you can build a custom action, you can build a custom widget. Typically, a plugin is probably going to be a combination of one of the three, but most likely it's going to be maybe a custom widget. And I'm leaning towards favoring FlutterFlow's approach better, because for me as a software engineer, as a software developer, I like that approach better. It's just simpler. There's a lot of like sample widgets you can use, a lot of things that you can use. And so yes, you can use how this works, and it has some JavaScript in there. You can kind of learn this proprietary way, or you can learn the FlutterFlow way. I am leaning towards FlutterFlow, and I understand this is a subjective thing probably, but definitely my opinion is toward FlutterFlow. And both FlutterFlow and Bubble have big libraries. So with big widgets and plugin libraries, right? So if I can go to add plugins here, I have a ton of plugins. But if I'm working with FlutterFlow, I can just go to pubdev, and there's a big repository, right? Popular packages that I can easily integrate into my app. So this is probably easier in Bubble for like beginners, but personally I prefer the FlutterFlow approach. It's just more, it's not as proprietary. It's more kind of programmatically understandable, right? It's more kind of understandable to people that have some background in other programmatical tools, right? Programming language and stuff like that. Whereas in Bubble, you have to start from scratch. So I'm leaning towards that. All right, so we have settings, and this is all this is all very similar to FlutterFlow has its own settings. And the thing about FlutterFlow is that you build an app using the Flutter framework. You just build it for all the stuff. It's proven and tested. It's supported by Google. They're the ones who, this is where Flutter and Dart was developed. And so, you're using a tool that's industry standard. Whereas in Bubble, it's proprietary. It's a team building it. And so you kind of have to rely on them to make sure that this is legit. We have more things here. We have an input, a multi-line input, which is a nice thing, because in FlutterFlow, you would not be able to do a multi-line input. You would need to expand how the cell looks like. So a lot of this is it's very kind of simplified, right? So Another thing I want to take a look at, so let's say we have this slider, right? We have a slider and we can specify things. And so you have different slider types, you have a range, and you can move it around. But what I can't do is I can't start a workflow from this slider, right? FlutterFlow is beginning to introduce widgets where you can, that widget is talking to you back. So somebody moved it. You can't do that with slider yet. But for instance, FlutterFlow has a stackable slidable deck, right? Stackable, or whatever they're called. Stackable, it's kind of that Tinder flow where it flows from you drag and drop it, you slide it to the left, slide it to the right. This is, as far as I know, it's not possible to do in Bubble. And this is one of the nice things about FlutterFlow. It's a little bit more interactive, okay? So even with FlutterFlow, you don't have a slider that kind of gives you feedback. So if you move it, it gives you kind of feedback. It tells you that you moved it. Other widgets do that. And it's very trivial to go out and find a widget that will do that for you. Whereas in Bubble, you know, there's no easy way to kind of start a workflow from this, right? I have this. And so you can bind it to to an elements thing. You can bind that there, but you know it's very kind of built in. And so you know if I want a slider to look a little bit differently, that is very, very easy to do in FlutterFlow. You can just get a create or find a widget that does that. So all of that is very easy. So even though like you know FlutterFlow doesn't have like as many like all these little elements and all these different things, it's fairly easy to kind of build it out. We have a datetime picker. This is actually a good thing because in FlutterFlow it's very ad hoc to do datetime pickers. The way you do it is you drag and drop a text in FlutterFlow and you just say, well, if you click on it, show them a datetime picker, and then if they change something, update this. You have to do two things. I'm hoping they're going to change how that works, whereas in Bubble, it's a datetime picker. That's how it should be. And so I would say like Bubble is more polished in some areas, whereas FlutterFlow is just more structured in some areas. They're completely like different tools. They work differently. You know, it's clear to me that FlutterFlow is built by two developers. And it is. I think I read the other day, it's built by two developers. Whereas Bubble may also be built by developers, but this has kind of they simplified it, right? A lot of things are very dumbed down, very, very simplified. I'm not taking anything away from Bubble. I'm not saying that it makes it in any way a worse tool or you know an inferior tool. It's definitely a great tool, but at the end of the day, it's two different philosophies, two different you know schools of thought, if you will, right? You know, you have, you know, workflow, data. The data part is really nice that you can store data there. Workflow is fairly kind of dumbed down. It's not easy to create like a custom function. It's not easy to kind of tweak something here and there. Even though this field here, where you are editing, it has, you know, it has like a lot of things that you can do. Like I have my name and I can lowercase, uppercase. All of this would need to be done using a custom function, which is not hard, but it's extra work. All right, so we looked at design, workflow, data, styles. Is the same plugins I talked about, settings and logs. And yeah, we don't really care about that too much. And so just some final thoughts. These tools are very different. They, you know, they are built kind of maybe even for different audience, right? It's kind of like you're either going to be in this camp or you're going to be in the FlutterFlow camp. I personally, I like FlutterFlow better. I feel that it is just kind of more aligned with what I like. It's more aligned with what I want. And with FlutterFlow, you know, you can build any kind of app because like in using Flutter, you know, there are apps that are built that you're using today probably. There are all kinds of Google apps that are built using Flutter. Whereas with Bubble, it's a great framework. It's a great tool, but it's not like an industry standard like Dart or Flutter. And so, yes, sometimes there's additional functionality that you need to code using Flutter, but it's a, you know, it kind of fits in that whole kind of philosophy and that school of thought. And so me personally, I just like, you know, from where I come from, my background, I just kind of like Flutter better. But I understand that there are people that like a Bubble better because there are things that Bubble does better in some instances than FlutterFlow. And so let me know in the comments below which tool you prefer and why. I would really love to hear your opinion, especially if you are not from a technical background, right? Unlike myself, if you are not technical, you've never been a developer, you don't know, I'm curious to hear your opinion. And also, if you want to view, clone all my Flutter apps, get access to more content, support this channel, support my work, check out the link in the description to join the Patreon. There's a great community of people who are supporting this content, making all of this possible. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I look forward to welcoming you as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you real soon.